Welcome, everyone. Good evening to everybody in East Africa. Good afternoon to those attending from Europe, South Africa, and the UK. And good morning to those of you from the United States. My name is Mohunya Maina. I'm the curator of the Eastern African Museum of Art in Nairobi, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all to this workshop. I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Zachary Kingdon, who will introduce this project and these series of workshops, followed by Dr. Maria Amelina, who is the director of the Eastern African Museum of Art in Nairobi. So over to you, Zachary. Welcome again, everybody.
I'll introduce, I'll give a short introduction, and then I believe Maria Amelina, one of the directors of Iman, will also follow with some introductory remarks. I'm going to share my screen now. So this is our third workshop. Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to see our audience here. Thank you very much for joining us today. For those of you who are joining us for the first time today, these workshops have been organized through a collaboration between Iman, the Eastern African Museum of Art Nairobi, and myself. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Zachary Kingdon. I represent National Museum Scotland in my role as Senior Curator of African Collections. Our workshops have been supported by a British Council Kenya Catalyst Follow-on grant as part of the British Council UK Kenya 2025 season. On Friday, the 20th of June, we held our first workshop in Dar es Salaam, where we heard directly from 5 of the most talented Blackwood sculptors still making art in Dar es Salaam, talking about their practice and their cultural inheritance. The workshop was held at the Alliance Francaise Exhibition Hall, where an exhibition of Makonde Blackwood sculpture is currently on show, which we helped them to organize. On Friday, on June the 26th, we held what we called our Makonde Art History Workshop, the second in our series, where we had the opportunity to discuss Mweden Makonde identity, creativity, and art with a panel of 4 international scholars after hearing their presentations on some of their recent research. Today's workshop is the third and final one in the series, in which we focus on Makonde Blackwood sculpture patrons and collectors and discuss institutional perspectives on Makonde Blackwood sculpting movement with a view to reflecting on the potential for future exhibitions and digital representation of Makonde art and artists. These workshops represent a follow-on from our original 2024 British Council Catalyst Grant project. Our Catalyst project involved Mohunya Maina and myself meeting up in Dar es Salaam last July to document Salim Lalani's collection of Makonde Blackwood sculpture and to address its cultural value. Our report on this work showed the collection to be a rare Dar es Salaam archive of over 200 Makonde Blackwood sculptures and fragments acquired between 1977 and 2002, which represents a highly significant body of work by celebrated Dar es Salaam Blackwood sculptors, including Samaki Likankoa, Chanua Maundu, Dastan Yedi, John Fundi, Christian Madango, and Thomas Valentino, whose innovative styles developed in post-colonial Dar es Salaam. Not only were these Blackwood sculptors among the most innovative and influential, but their works in the Lilani collection were acquired during a highly significant period of their late careers, when their early patron Mohamed Pira had left Tanzania and they would mostly become independent artists. Their practice had developed to a remarkable extent by this period and could no longer be compared in terms of quality and virtuosity with the earliest works of the Dar es Salaam Blackwood carving group. A selection of early works by the Dar es Salaam group dating from the first few years of the 1960s is reproduced in Anthony Stout's book, Modern Makonde Sculpture, which was published in 1966 in relation to an exhibition that was held in 1965. And you can see a selection in this slide, but it was both Dastan and Chanuo, who told me that in the early days, Makonde sculptors were not carving seriously and were just having a go at this kind of work. Later on, they developed a strong sense of identity, vocation, and virtuosity with respect to their work of Blackwood sculpting. Most of this art history remains untold, but it's embodied in a vast archive of Blackwood sculpture scattered and fragmented across numerous private collections in various different countries around the world. In 1998, I made a survey trip to Germany where I visited a number of Makonde Blackwood sculpture collections, whose owners kindly allowed me to photograph some of the works in their collections. For example, my current slide shows the collection made by Dr. Hans Eberhard Auenhammer, exhibited at the museum in Kornhaus Cluster near Heiligkreuztal. These are some of the extraordinary works by Dastaniedi in the museum, and more by Dastaniedi. These are others by Chanuo Maundu in the same collection. I also visited Captain Felix Lorenz in Lauenburg near Hamburg, who also kindly showed me some of his collection and allowed me to photograph a small selection of works in it. My current slide shows works by Dastaniedi in the Lorenz collection, and these are others by Chanuo Maundu in the Lorenz collection. Then there's this astonishing large-scale virtuoso work by Chanuo Maundu, also in the Lorenz collection. So I've shown you a very small sample of the work of just two of the Dar es Salaam Blackwood sculptors in two very large private collections. I have no idea how large the Lorenz collection is or how many Chanuo and Dastan works it contains, but the collection as a whole doesn't hold hundreds of Blackwood works, it holds thousands. Many other large private collections exist, including others in Germany, and Maxim Moll, one of our speakers today, will tell us a bit about the Moll collection in Germany. Other collections can be found in the USA, in East Africa, and there's also a museum of Makonde sculpture in Japan, and so on. Then there's a multitude of small private collections held in private homes scattered around the globe. How can we begin to approach the art history and legacy of such a prolific and scattered sculptural movement? This is one of the key questions that we want to raise in this workshop, because without a better understanding of the size, diversity, and quality of the output of Makonde Blackwood sculpting as a whole, Makonde Blackwood sculpture will continue to be undervalued, and its place in the broader history of African, East African, and world art will not be adequately understood. As all of you will know, Africa is no stranger to having parts of its material culture scattered outside the continent. One of the most shameful British colonial episodes in West Africa took place in February 1897, when a so-called punitive expedition was sent to conquer and take over the Edo Kingdom and its capital city of Benin in southern Nigeria. The British troops systematically looted and sacked the royal palace compound and removed thousands of works of Edo court art in bronze, ivory, wood, and other materials. These scattered works were then sold at auction to the highest bidder in London and were purchased by collectors, dealers, and museums in Britain and Europe, so that they entered institutions and private collections around the world. There are calls for these works to be returned to Nigeria, and some institutions and private citizens have already returned works to the Edo monarch, the Oba, in Benin City. In November 2022, a remarkable project called Digital Benin was launched by the Museum am Rothenbaum in Hamburg, with the involvement of 131 institutional partners in 20 countries, including the Nigerian National Commission for Museums and Monuments. During the course of my work as Senior Curator of African Collections at National Museum Scotland, I was privileged to participate in the project, which serves as a kind of catalogue raisonné documenting over 5,000 works of Edo court art, as well as historical photographs and other documentary material. It offers a pioneering online platform facilitating the digital restitution of Edo artworks in a way that helps to reconnect sacred Edo court artworks scattered among numerous Western institutions with the Edo community in Nigeria and with a widespread Edo diaspora outside Nigeria as well. It also serves as a very valuable resource for African cultural historians and researchers around the world. The project website allows users to search its database via participating institutions or by types of object or by other themes, and it constitutes a remarkable tool for advancing study of Edo arts and culture, despite the scattered and fragmented nature of this corpus of artworks. In order to honor the extraordinary legacy of Makonde Blackwood artists like Chano Maundu, shown here outside his home with his family in 1992, I think it would be fitting for collectors of Makonde Blackwood sculpture to come together in partnership to create a somewhat similar digital Makonde platform and resource that would enable a digital gathering together and a digital restitution of the prolific and widely scattered artistic legacy of the Makonde Blackwood sculpting movement. And I hope this is one of the issues that we can discuss later on today. Now that's nearly enough from me, but before I introduce our speakers for today, I would just like to leave you with a thought-provoking quote from the Guerrilla Girls taken from one of their iconic postcards, which I think is also relevant to addressing the situation in which Makonde Blackwood sculpture has languished for far too long. And I quote, "Don't let museums reduce art to the small number of artists who have won a popularity contest among big-time art dealers, curators, and collectors. If museums do not show art as diverse as the cultures they claim to represent, tell them they're not showing the history of art, they're just preserving the history of wealth and power." So it just remains for me to introduce our speakers for today. We have 3 speakers, and their presentations are discussion papers rather than polished or comprehensive lectures. They're intended to stimulate conversations in the final part of the workshop. We will start with Dr. Uta Reus-Dajan, who will tell us about the promotion of Makonde art in Germany. Uta has been a lecturer in Swahili at the Asia-Africa Institute of Hamburg University, Germany. She has published numerous works of Swahili translation, Swahili literature, and Tanzanian popular culture. While working in southeastern Tanzania in the 1980s, she made a collection of Makonde sculpture from artists who settled in the region as refugees. Later, she organized an exhibition together with Dr. Elizabeth Gross showing collections by German volunteers, made by German volunteers who'd worked in the Lindian and Mtwara regions. And she co-edited the accompanying catalogue, which was published in 1993. Our second presentation will be from Maxi Moll, who will give us an insight into what it was like growing up with Makonde sculptures. Maxi is the daughter of Max Moll, one of the early enthusiasts of Makonde sculpture, who became a preeminent collector, dealer, and exhibitor of Makonde art in Germany. Maxi is a freelance art historian who studied European art history, political science, and European law at the University of Heidelberg and at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, where she did an Erasmus year. Her PhD dissertation focused on a fascinating 18th century architectural project in Germany, the Museum Fridericianum in Kassel, which was the first purpose-built museum building in Europe. Our third speaker today is Muhunyo Maina, who will present us with some food for thought in relation to a regional ethnic interconnectivity in the East African trade in wood carvings, Makonde Blackwood carvers, their neighbors and competitors. Muhunyo is an art historian and journalist with an MA in art history from Rhodes University in South Africa. As a writer, essayist, journalist, and curator, he's focused on Eastern Africa and the Global South, and especially the history of Kenyan art, literature, and music. Once again, thank you for joining us today for our third workshop. I'm going to hand you back to Mohunyo, who will be in charge of coordinating our schedule and program for today. Mohunyo.
Sorry for that. Shitani have been playing some games with me for a couple of days. I've lost my voice yesterday, but have some of it today. So sorry about this uncalled for hoarseness. As Mohunyo said in his introduction, my name is Maria Amelina. I'm a managing director of Iman, Eastern African Museum of Art, Nairobi. Here I am representing our co-director, Ambassador Bitangin Demo, and our chairman, Mr. Isaac Owondo. The presence of our core member, Ambassador Martin Kimani, who is now in his new wonderful role is the director and president of the Africa Center in New York, is also happily acknowledged. Our mandate is simple and straightforward. Our goal is to close the gap between the world-class nature of Eastern African art and the quality of institutions that represent it. Nothing could be closer to the heart of this mandate than the subject of today's workshop. Makonde sculptures and Makonde sculptors have been the pride of Eastern African artistic tradition. In the 60s and 70s, as today much more qualified speakers will tell you, and as Zachary has started to tell you, individual Makonde artists have transformed the traditional skill into powerful modern interpretations of the changing post-independence reality around them. Different styles and sub-movements were created, competing with each other and inspired by each other. Yet, you would not know that visiting prominent museums of art. The question is why? A more important question is how to correct it. Works of art, no matter how talented, cannot exist in an institutional vacuum. It can physically exist on someone's wall, in Tutankhamun's tomb, or in a closed private collection. But it cannot be transferred, communicated, channeled to broader audiences, become part of our understanding and love for an artistic canon without an infrastructure of scholarship and appreciation. Mona Lisa needs Louvre as a place where it meets its audiences. From there, it travels to publications, memes, and t-shirts. For this to happen, generations of researchers enhance our appreciation of its genius by putting this portrait into its rich Italian Renaissance context, pointing to the subtleties of its various effects. More importantly, the Medicis and other art sponsors and patrons, all these hundreds of years ago, created the milieu where the art could thrive and artists could interact and create. Makonde Blackwood sculptors found the beginning of such infrastructure at the post-independence Dar es Salaam in the form of the yard of Mr. Mohamed Pira, and later in shops and commissions made by Mzee Wiso in the Karibu Gallery, Husseini, hopefully present here today, and collection of Salim Lalani, collection that we have been so intimately engaged with for the past 2 years. This space for creativity and exchange brought out the best in the sculptors of the first generation. This development was captured in the publication From Ritual to Modern Art, published also in Eastern Africa in Dar es Salaam by Mkuki na Nyota Publishing House. The publisher of this book is Walter Bagoye. You could see him in the first photograph shown by Salim. Sadly, today he's sick, but he may be joining later. I'm reading from the article in this publication. The article is called "Modern Makonde Sculpture: An Inquiry into the Shitani Style" by Mshana. Pierre's patronage in the development of modern Makonde carving was considerable and indisputable. However, it could have hardly existed without the original Shitani styles. Furthermore, its effect would have been limited had it not been for the dedication, hard work, and heightened sense of vocation of the more creative artists. Conversely, the rich dialogue in this circle of esteemed carvers should not be overlooked. So a publication in Eastern Africa acknowledged that this is modern art, that this art has been created by individualized modernist artists. Sadly, this is not how this art has been interpreted by the Western curators, and we will come back to that later. This fragile introspection of creation and appreciation started to develop around the modern Makonde sculpture in Dar es Salaam. Yet, in these pre-internet times, African art fashion, was made elsewhere. A couple of statements by influential curators in the West precluded solidification of this infrastructure into global recognition. Where East African art appreciation community recognized the bold and talented manifestations of modernity, Western curatorial rainmakers saw the lack of authenticity. Indeed, these artists were not authentic, whatever authentic means. The way Picasso was not authentic Spanish, he was modern. But for an African artist, this was a sin and a deviation. Another sin was producing for the market, again, forgetting that Mona Lisa itself was a commission. Here I'm quoting for an influential publication of that time. An ersatz style developed in the early 1960s for Makonde carvers in Tanzania. Working with an Indian merchant named Makonde Pira, has burgeoned into a major export. And like most tourists' art, it responds to the Western buyer's admiration of uniqueness and authorship. Sculptures are all different and many are signed. It's difficult to know where to start here. Like every word is precious. So the ethnicity of the Mohammed Pire is an issue. Signing of works is an issue. Everything that constitutes modern art creation and appreciation is clearly an issue. So I would like to actually read from the same article by Mshana on the issue of modernity and appreciation of these sculptures made in Dar es Salaam at this time. Western cultural institutions shun Makonde sculpture for unauthenticity. Wemba Rashid is one of those who offers valuable insights into response to criticisms of African art. This criticism focuses on authenticity, aestheticism, quality, age, and vanity. Vanity must be signing of your artworks. I share this perspective on African art as a dynamic, changing entity whose creators react and respond to concrete realities. In this context, the African artist produces art viable and congruent with to present realities. So again, these are two positions expressed at two different times in Tanzania and in the West on what Makonde sculpture and sculptors that worked in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in Dar es Salaam represent.
Maria, I believe we are now moving on to our presentations. As you know, we have a tight schedule and a tight ship. So with your permission, I think we need to move on.
Okay, Mohonyo, yes. I think this shows enough that infrastructure that existed in Dar es Salaam was powerful, dedicated, but not sufficient to beat the perceptions of powerful curators. And the infrastructure making was interrupted. The art making was not interrupted, but the infrastructure making was. And we're hoping to do it right this time around. Eastern African Museum of Art is deeply grateful to the collectors from East and West that continued collecting, supporting the artists, and some of them are present here today. We're thankful to Walter Bagoya and Mkuki Bagoya and Mkuki Nanyota Publishing House. We will also hear for the young curators, including Tura and Mouhunio, who are curating the exhibition in Alliance Française, and we're grateful to Dar es Salaam Alliance Française for allowing this to happen. So I think in this group, we can restart this path, and hopefully this time around, Makonde sculpture will travel to museums, memes, and T-shirts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Melina. Now we shall have our first presentation by Uta Royster-Jan. So over to you, Uta.
Yeah, my presentation is about the promotion of Makonde art in Germany. Germany is certainly one of the centers of Makonde sculpture in Europe, as reflected in the number of private collections. As Tanzania was a focus of German development cooperation for a long time, many experts and volunteers came into contact with Makonde sculpture and set up collections. For the most part, however, these collectors did not act publicly as promoters of this art form. The promoters of Makonde sculpture in Germany were a few individuals from outside the context of development cooperation, who together formed a more or less strong network and utilized their contacts into various areas of society. Their promotional activities have made a major contribution to the visibility and reputation of Makonde sculpture in Germany. My presentation is about the sponsors and promoters, patrons of Makonde sculpture in Germany, about their motivations and their promotional strategies. However, it must also be asked why these promoters, all of whom have since passed away, have not found successors to pursue their approaches. The question will be whether there are new approaches emerging. My sources are mainly texts from catalogs, flyers, programs, and reports in newspapers about exhibitions and so on, as well as some visits to exhibitions and personal encounters with some of the individuals mentioned. The group of promoters of Makonde sculpture was small but effective. Max Mohl was the pioneer among the private collectors. He came into contact with the Makonde sculptors through his travels and began to collect their works. His sales exhibitions have been documented since the 1970s at the latest. The sea captain Felix Lorenz played a special role. Through his regular visits to Tanzania, he became an important supplier who not only procured sculptures, but later also brought large quantities of Tinga-Tinga paintings to Germany. Hans Eberhard Auernhammer came into contact with Makonde sculpture at an advanced age, yet built up one of the finest collections. The Catholic mission in Twara, where many carvers from Mozambique had settled, played a major role in the church context and beyond. Father Ildefons Weigand was of great importance here as he managed production in Tanzania and shipping to Germany. Christian Straub was also part of the community of Makonde art enthusiasts. He set up a center for Makonde sculpture in northern Germany in his so-called Africa Manyatta, a center for modern African art with a focus on Makonde sculpture. None of these promoters is still alive, and their work has not been continued by successors. However, there has been a new initiative by Sebastian Hansen on the internet for around 20 years now. Max Mohl was, as I said, a pioneer of Makonde sculpture in Germany. He was a collector and a very active exhibitor, seller, and catalog author who contributed a great deal to making this art visible. After the National Arts Council was established in Tanzania, he became the sole agent for Germany for this state organization. His exhibitions were always sales exhibitions, and many collectors added his sculptures to their collections. In his mediation work and promotion of Makonde sculpture, he pursued a strategy of exoticization. In his texts, he placed the sculptures in the context of myth and magic and emphasized the character of the works as sensual, foreign, authentic, and stressed the primal energy in Makonde sculpture. In his catalogues, he interpreted some sculptures quite subjectively. He thus linked Makonde sculpture with primeval Africa, even though he pointed out that in modern Makonde sculpture, the artists had achieved a freedom of expression that was previously unknown. This was a limiting element. Later, especially later, this kind of presentation of Makonde art that no longer fitted in the era of decolonization and globalization. Moll organized a great number of exhibitions. For example, in 1983 in Stuttgart, 1988 in Mainz, 1998 in Berlin. And we can see here flyers for 2 exhibitions. And interestingly, the motto has remained the same. Schwarze Poesie und unverschämte Sinnlichkeit. Black Poetry and Shameless Sensuality in 1988, as well as in 2001. So this shows, I think, that Moll's approach remained the same throughout his era, let's say. Here we can see Moll's catalogs. He contributed greatly to the visibility of Makonde art in Germany through these catalogs. The first one in 1977 was probably the second in Germany, after the very first exhibition in Germany in Stuttgart in 1971. In this catalogue, Moll recounts his travels to the Makonde settlement area and describes the world of the Makonde from his subjective ethnographic perspective without reference to scientific sources in the text. He draws on his own impressions from his travels and visits to Makonde villages. There is a statement about Makonde sculpture in this catalogue where he says, a quote, "Not old, but authentic, created under inner compulsion, rooted in tradition, born of ritual. The Makonde have the power of the naive, the carefree, the divinely gifted. They create spontaneously, unadulterated, undiluted. They are artists because they are thoroughbred Africans. They burst with abundance, they foam over. Within them there is fermenting at work." End of quote. Besides these quite rich language and subjective language and generalizing language, there is another quote in the catalogue where he refers to the purchase of a sculpture by a museum in America for the sum of $275,000. And he writes, quote, "That's a proud price. It has risen from owner to owner. First hand, straight from the bush. Many things are still cheap, but prices are rising." And this was, of course, meant as an incentive for people to buy the sculptures from him. Felix Lorenz was a sea captain with the Deutsche Afrika-Linien and regularly traveled to Tanzania since 1956. In that year, he says that he, for the first time, saw Makonde sculpture and was immediately fascinated by it, and so he became an early collector of Makonde sculpture and later also Tinga Tinga paintings. He maintained an intensive contact with Makonde artists on site in Tanzania, especially in Dar es Salaam, and he became a major supplier for German collectors, especially Auernhammer. but also built a significant private collection, which he showed in some exhibitions like the ones which are mentioned here. Dr. Hans Eberhard Auenhammer built one of the most renowned Makonde collections in Germany, starting from 1983, when he was already 73 years old. He followed an academic approach to promotion, striving for nuanced mediation. He collaborated with ethnologists, for example, Elisabeth Groß from the University of Mainz, Gisela Plesse, Leipzig, Petra Konrading from the Linden Museum in Stuttgart, and even Margot Diaz, known for her and her husband's ethnography of the Makonde in Mozambique, for scientific advice, catalogue essays, and opening speeches. And also he tried to present his sculptures in a museum context and not so much as sales exhibitions. Elisabeth Groß, for example, was a key mediator between ethnological scholarship, collectors, and the public. She closely collaborated with the Auenhammer collection in museum initiatives and delivered opening speeches at exhibitions. She authored influential catalogue essays in which she provided cultural, historical, and symbolic context for Makonde art. She thus worked to counteract exoticizing stereotypes. The Auenhammer collection also contributed a great number of works as loans to the exhibition Art Makonde in Paris in 1989. Auenhammer even attempted to establish a permanent exhibition, but this did not work out. In one of his catalogues, Auenhammer recounts how he became a collector. According to this account, a visit to one of Moll's sales exhibitions was fateful. The Makonde sculptures mesmerized him, and he immediately bought 12 pieces from Moll. He was then keen to find old pieces and bought sculptures from the liquidation of old collections. He also acquired pieces from Pastor Straub's Africa Manyatta, which I mentioned earlier, quite early in his career as collector. His encounter with Sea Captain Lawrence, however, was very decisive. Lawrence became his, as he put it, tracker and buying agent in East Africa, as Auenhammer himself never traveled there. He gave him photocopies from old catalogues like from Stout or Barretta to help him find what he was looking for. According to Auenhammer, the collaboration proved to be very successful. Here we see two catalogues of exhibitions by Auenhammer, one from 1990 and the other from 1994, and also the flyers which contain the cultural program around the exhibition, which was quite on a high level, I must say. For example, Gerhard Kubik, the really renowned music ethnologist, came to play Quela music with his band, and there was a range of cultural program, cultural events. And Auenhammer tried or attempted to make the exhibition in Merseburg permanent, but this, as I said, did not work out. So after he died in 2000, I really don't know what became of his collection. Father Ildefonse Weigand from the Benedictine Abbey in Mtwara is a very important promoter of Makonde sculpture on from the side of the Catholic Church. He was a major patron of Makonde sculptures. He provided space for the carvers and guaranteed sales, which was really important for them because it gave them some security. He encouraged quality carving, but did not impose rules. And he promoted Christian motifs in Makonde art, such as crucifixes, cribs, and Madonnas. A survey conducted in 1981 found that in Mtwara region, 80% of sculptures sold to Father Ildefonse, 33% to Ndanda Abbey, also from the Benedictine order, and 23% to Max Moll. From Mtwara, large quantities of sculptures were shipped to Münster-Schwarzach in Germany, Münster-Schwarzach Abbey, where they were sold in the Abbey shop. This meant that buyers from the church and charity sectors were especially reached. There used to be an exhibition at the Abbey Museum, which, however, was abandoned in the mid-2010s. A number of pieces which were brought to Germany by Father Ildefonse went to private collections. Father Ildefonse, as I said, died in the year 2000, and his project was continued by his assistant. Nevertheless, the range of products in the Abbey shop is no longer comparable to what it used to be. Only animal figures, naturalistic figures, and Ujamaa sculptures are now on sale in the shop. In conversation with the shop assistant, it became clear that demand has gone down dramatically, and some genre of Makonde sculpture, like Shetani and Mawingu, are not anymore included. The shop has also an online presence, and there the Abbey offers crucifixes and Ujamaa sculptures of 2 different heights. For the prices can be seen here, and this height is like 50 centimeters, while this is 30. And this is offered under the label of gifts and special occasions, not art. So, as has become clear so far, the visibility of Makonde sculpture depended on the commitment of individual collectors and promoters through building collections, organizing exhibitions, founding centers for African or Makonde art, connecting with museums and cultural institutions. While the representations of some promoters confirmed stereotypes about Africa and African arts, scholarly mediation by cultural anthropologists contributed to contextualizing Makonde art and countering stereotypes. However, the art market did not really absorb Makonde sculpture. There could not be a connection established between the promoters and the art market. If we look at the issues in the promotional strategies of the promoters, we can see that there was a lack of mediation between artists and the public. The artists remained always invisible. They had no presence in Germany. Also, value was attached to their names. No sculptor was ever invited to exhibitions or vernissage. The works were essentially presented as a phenomenon of collective art. I mean, the label Makonde art speaks for itself here. The commercialization, the sales that took place were always confined to special sales exhibitions or contacts between collectors, but all that happened outside the established art market. And there was and is also a lack of institutional structures. The visibility of Makonde sculpture depended on individuals, and it is just a fact that the public awareness and the interest in and the demand for Makonde sculpture declined after the withdrawal or death of those few promoters. There is also now a supply problem because export duties have become higher or have been put in place, and the Blackwood has become scarce. So there is also a decline in the production, as we could hear from the sculptors themselves in the first workshop. But now we are in the era of the internet, and there are new approaches and new possibilities as well. And here I show you the website of Sebastian Hansen, himself a collector, where he presents parts of the collections of 14 collectors, not only Makonde sculpture, but also Tinga paintings. And this site is really very informative. The visitor can learn about the artists and their styles, and under service, there is a list of publications related to Makonde sculpture. So this is a really, really useful and also very appealing website. It also facilitates sales, and I hope that Sebastian Hansen is with us here, so that it would be great if he could tell us more about his website. So in conclusion, we can say that the visibility and cultural engagement for Makonde sculpture in Germany was closely tied to individuals. And so when they passed away, they left a gap or a vacuum. And there was a lack of direct involvement of artists. The commercialization outside the art market shaped the public perception of those works. And today there is an enthusiast scene, collector networks, mostly online, on the website of Sebastian Hansen, especially. But all in all, Makonde art remains a niche phenomenon. There are challenges. The presence of the artist should be increased. We need new mediation formats and, overcoming stereotypes. And perhaps if new forms of presentation and real encounters with artists could be found, that would provide fresh impulses. So that's I have reached the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
The next presenter is Maximilian Moll, and we are going to be playing her presentation.
Dear Ms. Womaita, dear Safari, dear audience, I'm happy to be invited to this workshop and to give a short presentation on my father's life and his collection of Makonde sculptures. As you read in my bio, I studied European art history, politics and European law, so my focus in my daily life is on the European side of art. But of course, the Makonde sculptures are part of my life ever since. I've grown up amongst them and could not imagine a house or flat without them. My father, Max Mohl, was born in 1927 in Besigheim, Germany, which is in the southern part of Germany. After the Second World War, he studied economy in Mannheim and Tübingen, where he did his PhD in 1953. In his first career, he was working for a big insurance company, but very soon he realized that office work was not his cup of tea. He wanted to travel the world. He went to Oxford for private studies, where he met my mother. Beginning of the 1960s, he went by ship from Southampton to Africa and traveled the continent widely. The ship was not a holiday dreamliner, but a cargo ship, where they had a few cabins for guests who also would help out on the boat from time to time. Having returned home, he wrote the first of his 4 travel books, Einmal Afrika und zurück bitte, using his notes from his travels, as well as profound library research that followed the trip. The first book was followed by 3 other travel books about India, Russia, and Sri Lanka in the following years, all published by the well-known publishing house Bertelsmann. The titles of these books were Gandhis gefährliches Erbe, Toi 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 Tovarisch, and Mbane Buddhas. Having studied economy, he was furthermore interested in the economic developments and affluent economic countries worldwide. So he also wrote books about Germany as a global player on the world market. The well-known slogan, Made in Germany, served as a title for his book. He also wrote a book about Japan and the economy there. At home in Germany again, he was offered a job at the major department store Kaufhof in the finance department. But again, this would mean a 9-to-5 office job. He rejected the job offer, but once in contact with Kaufhof, he asked whether they would be interested in small exhibitions on Africa. During his first trip to Africa, he came across handicraft art, little objects that were sold for tourists, masks, letter openers, animals, bookends, little sitting figures, wooden hats, etc., which he thought would be worthwhile importing to Germany. The love for the material wood did not come about by chance. He had a special attachment to objects made of wood, as his maternal grandfather was a wood sculptor. His brother later on became a sculptor as well, working especially for wineries, decorating wine barrels or trays with his carvings. So there was something like a wooden gene at some point in the family, and wood was definitely more sensual, more haptic and pleasing for the eye than an accountant's machine. So he did start with importing handicraft objects and had his first exhibitions at Kaufhof. Having realized that there was an interest in Africa and Germany at that time, he dared to focus in a second step on African art, especially Makonde art, from southeastern Tanzania and northern Mozambique. Since then, he imported Makonde sculptures. He was well aware of the difference between handicraft and artworks, and focused in the following exhibitions on works of art. Every sculpture was unique. It cannot be reproduced because the irregular growth of the ebony wood forces the artist to feel the figure anew each time. Under President Nyerere, he signed an exclusive contract with National Arts of Tanzania and became their sole agent. He had the exclusive right to export Makonde art. This resulted in many privileges, but also many obligations, like organizing exhibitions, giving lectures and printing publications on the artists, all at his own costs. President Nyerere once said, "One of the pillars of our culture is art." And I think my father was one of the collectors who made the Makonde sculptors and their works of art known worldwide. Since then, my father traveled 2 to 3 times per year to East Africa, staying for several weeks, meeting the artists in person, doing intense field work and connecting with other art dealers like Mohamed Pira, whose daughter Zara Pira will take part in the discussion later on as well, as I've heard. So on the left side, you see my father with Samaki in 1988, And on the right side, this is also my father with Samaki, probably also in 1988. Having had a father who was away for several weeks a year, I was very much excited when he came home. Memories of my childhood are full of big mesh bags filled with wonderful ripe mangoes and papayas he would bring home from his trips. These fruits were not at all available in the local supermarkets in Germany at that time, and symbolized for me as a child that Africa must be paradise on earth. So on the left side, you see my father as I knew him forever in his safari shirts, which he had loads and loads at home, with his camera bag and a hat. He always had a hat on his head. Yes, a hat on his head. And on the right side, you see him in the forest of Korhobo with his camera taking photos. The many sculptures my father bought were brought by ship to Germany. In the first years, they were stored in a small place. Later on, my father built his Africa Museum in Wiesenbach, where he had twice a year, in spring and autumn, open gallery weekends with guests and customers from all over Germany. So on the left side, you see our museum, and on the right side, you see me as a little girl hiding behind my father's legs, and it must have been the time when the museum was built. Yes. In addition to his museum and the exhibitions there, he had timed exhibitions for normally 4 to 6 weeks in major German cities as Berlin, Hamburg, Cologne, Dresden, and many more cities. I remember the exhibition in Berlin very fondly. I was about 8. Together with my maternal grandmother, I accompanied my father for 4 weeks to Berlin, helping him at the exhibition and spending some time together in Berlin. It was great fun. These exhibitions, of course, widened his client base, and so from year to year, more African art lovers were invited twice a year to the small village Wiesenbach near Heidelberg. In 1990, my father had his 25th anniversary with his gallery. Over all these years, the situation amongst the carvers in Africa had changed. Recent developments showed that carvers do no longer dream away and create stories about their ancestors, make sculptures on the topics like fertility, birth, famine, loss of a child, old myths, ancestral mothers, and demons. Times had changed, and myths and rites were no longer as present in their daily life as before. The carvers had gradually adjusted to new topics that were favored by carving cooperatives or missionaries. They were paid a fixed price for a sculpture, depending on the size of the figures. Of course, there are still some sculptures left from his collection, which we have partly in our home. Other sculptures will be presented in due time in a building near Heidelberg again, so that interested persons, scientists or researchers, will have the possibility to have a look at them. So on this slide, you see 2 sculptures by John Fundy in my mother's home. And this is again at my mother's place. And again at her place. And now these are 2 sculptures at my place, to the Stanis. And on the left at my place at Astani, and on the right Madangur. Yeah, thank you very much for listening and for your interest, and goodbye.
Thank you for that presentation, Maximilian. We have an 8 to 10 minute window for questions. So if you would like to ask a question, I would ask you to raise your hand, and I shall select 1 or 2 of you. But I do believe that Zara Pira is with us today. If you are Zara, could you kindly reveal yourself?
Hi.
I think it would be great to hear from you, given that your father has been mentioned twice, and I shall mention him again. Is there anything you'd like to add or comment on the presentations?
Good afternoon. Sorry, my video is not working, so you won't be able to see me. But thank you. I'm so happy to be connected to all of you here. Thank you for the presentations. I think the initiative and the work that has been carried on for a few years now is important, and I'm happy to see that there is still interest. Unfortunately, when we moved out of Tanzania back in '73, taking the time to settle back in Europe, the Makonde carvings or our dad's passion for Makonde was not a priority anymore. But we do recall a number of stories that he told us. Also, when he went back to Dar es Salaam in '94, he met with some of the carvers. So yeah, I'm just happy to see what's happening now, and I'll contribute whatever I can to the research and the initiatives that are decided to take the art forward and have it more visible, with also the right perception, the right value that should be given to this art. And I fully agree with the misconception that the art has been given for so many years, and it's very sad to see the commercialization of identical objects or identical sculptures, when I know very well that our dad, the one thing that he always wanted was to keep the uniqueness of each and every piece. And he used to tell the carvers, the sculptors, he used to tell them, I don't want to see this because you've copied from your neighbor, you've copied from another carver. We need to bring that uniqueness back. So thank you. I'm happy to be a part of it, and thank you to all for doing the work that you do.
Thank you, Zara. If anybody else has any questions for our first two presenters, again, you can raise your hand and I shall call upon you.
Mohunya, do you have any comments or questions yourself, given that you're a speaker later on?
No, I'm still digesting. Frankly, I think Uta's was quite a bit. And I look forward to our panel discussion afterwards. I think I'll have prepared some more formal questions. But I think off the bat, I would say the I wouldn't call it a disconnect, but I suppose what happens to these works once they leave the continent, just hearing from Uta all the details, and also from Maximilian about how her father's works were shipped and the museum in Germany. These are things as an African curator you don't really have access to. So that was really good to hear of all these, where exactly these works went, which is part of my work on the continent.
Yeah, it's interesting that there was a link between the National Arts of Tanzania and giving an exclusive export license to Max Moll, which indicates also Tanzanian priorities at that time, right?
Yeah. So again, I think I'll cook up some more questions. But that was the most striking thing off the bat. If none of our audience, I don't see any hands. Oh, Uta's raised the hand. There you go, Uta.
Yes, thank you. I read somewhere that Mohamed Pera became the first director of the National Arts Council of Tanzania. Is that true? And how long did he stay in that position, if it's true?
Zara, do Do you want to answer that one, or shall I try and say what I know?
Yes, he was a part of it. It didn't last very long. I think it was just a couple of years. And one thing that he had tried to organize at that time was an exhibition on Makonde sculptures in the US. And I think by the time it was supposed to take place, that's when we had to leave for France. So it was just a couple of years. I'm sure I would have some documents in our archives because we have a lot of articles and everything. So I could find that information for you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Anybody else with any other questions so far before we move on to our last presentation?
I might just add that when I interviewed Mohamed Pira in Paris, he told me he was one of the directors with his brother at the National Arts of Tanzania under an expatriate kind of consultant who was called Berger. So there was also kind of foreign consultancy involved at that period. So yeah, there's a lot to be unearthed around that period, and it's been very unexplored. It's obviously one of the areas that could well benefit from further research.
Also, for me, that's a very interesting period because the government seems to have been involved and very much interested in arts those days, and they did a lot of regulation. And as far as I read, I'm not sure if that's right, Mohamed Pera also had some real trouble with the government in the end, but I'm not sure about if it's true and what the reasons were. But there must have been a strong interest in arts, which is no longer given today in Tanzania. Government interest. Do you have any more info on that, or what happened those days, or if it was a real also financial issue for the government? It was much more interesting financially than it is nowadays. Does anyone know in the team here?
I'm not aware of the details. Perhaps Zara can tell us a bit more.
Unfortunately, I don't have more information about it. I know that he did travel and was trying to promote the art. I think it was also a very difficult, I mean, some people would not see it the same way, but it was a difficult time from the late 60s up until 73, 74 with all the nationalization. So I think the priorities had also shifted by then. Yeah, so that's what I would be able to say right now, unless I do some more research about it. The 60s, there was definitely interest on promoting the art, but then nationalization and everything that was involved in that took over from the priority of art. Or
I have a small question as well, if possible. Muhoni, is this a good moment?
Yeah, I think this could be our last question.
So again, I'm going back to the article by Mshana when he describes the work in Mohamed Pira's yard. He says the primary motivation spurring these men was not a desire for money, though the economic aspect was certainly important. Rather, it was a desire to be called fundi, a master craftsperson, someone with the abilities to repair or create, an artist, a real artist. Among these, the more ambitious aspired to be recognized as the greatest fundi of all. And Zachary, he's also quoting from your work, since you were one of the apprentices to Dastani at that time. So maybe Zara or Zachary could speak a bit about this environment of competition and a unique creativity in this yard, because again, everybody's saying that it's so commercial and again, so there's so many misconceptions. So maybe that's the moment to a bit clarify how the artists themselves perceive their creation and their priorities and work in that environment.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think we heard quite a lot about the role of competition in Makonde society in Mozambique from Paulo Israel last in the second workshop. But yes, I mean, the environment in Pira's yard was competitive. That we have to look at the artists as developing over a long period of time. There's an art history to this movement. And as I said in my introduction, originally the artists were just trying out different types of work in their life and trying to get by. But as carving took hold as a career, as a way of earning a living, as a way of expressing themselves, and having some agency in the world, it took on a completely different meaning to the individuals as as creative expression. So yes, we have to explore this history. In many cases, maybe they started off as just a commercial endeavor, but as they improved, as it took hold on their psyche, their whole life, as it were, it became something else. It became something that was a vocation, and it developed as part of their identity. So we have to look at it in those terms. But we can talk more about this in the discussion session. I think we're probably running out of time, right, Nhunyo?
Yeah, just a little bit. I will try and speed up my presentation so we have more time for these riveting conversations. The creation and sale of wooden sculptures by indigenous community in East Africa were a unified response to the privations of colonialism. The sale of figurines enabled Africans to accumulate currency and wealth in a newly enforced capitalist system, and in the case of the Makonde community, provide the means to purchase arms and sustain a military resistance, Frelimo, against the exploitative regime of the Portuguese. The carving industry in East Africa was highly lucrative and reached its zenith in the mid-20th century, with collectors of sculptors belonging to the Makonde community of Mozambique and Tanzania, and the Akamba community of Kenya dominating this East African trade. Walter Elkan, a British economist, wrote in 1956 that the people of one Kamba village alone grossed at least £150,000 and possibly as much as £250,000 from the sale of wood carvings, which is roughly £3 million today. As Paulo Israel noted in our second workshop, Makonde Blackwood sculpture is indeed significantly driven by the market. Accordingly, there is a singular factor which has led to historians and tastemakers of African art to question the authenticity of Makonde sculpture. This is the fact that it is created to be consumed not by the community of the sculptors themselves, but by foreigners. Since its inception at the end of the 19th century, the market for figurines and sculptures from sub-Saharan Africa has been entirely made up of Western consumers. In East Africa before 1900, these consumers were mostly colonial settlers and settler farmers from the British Empire, both British nationals as well as individuals from South Africa and as far away as New Zealand. After the First World War, this market was swelled by large numbers of tourists who traveled to the continent for leisure, and expatriates from Western Europe, in particular Germany, as well as the United Kingdom and North America. The politics of the display of African objects in the West has been thoroughly unpacked and debated in contemporary discourse. So too has the role of agents, middlemen, and traders in Nairobi, Dar es Salaam, and other urban centers. Thanks to the work of Zachary Kingdon and others, such as yourselves who are participating in this workshop, we have heard stories of traders in wood carvings like Mohammed Pira. Pira's steady patronage and consistent support of Makonde sculptures in Dar es Salaam provided artists like Samaki Likankoa, Roberto Jacobo Sangwani, and Clement Ngala the creative freedom to invent new and innovative genres and styles of sculpture in the 1960s. Zachary Kingdon's research in his book A Host of Devils also offers valuable insights into the creative process of Makonde artists, as well as the relationship dynamics between artists within this Makonde diaspora community of Dar es Salaam. However, little to no critical research has been conducted concerning how the Makonde sculptors in Dar es Salaam operated within a vast network of sculptural collectives across the East African region, as well as the interactions and relationships with other sculpting communities both in Tanzania and other East African countries. Neither has the impact of their work among these communities and how the work of other communities influenced them. On a recent visit to Wamunyu Handcraft Society in Machakos County, Eastern Kenya, I was greeted with a carving of Mutisia Munge, the progenitor of modern Akamba sculpture. Munge was solely responsible for founding the first Akamba sculpture collective in Wamunyu circa 1920, after the First World War. Here in his birthplace, his inheritors have credited his time spent learning from Makonde sculptors in Dar es Salaam with his invention of modern Akamba figurative aesthetics. However, the vast majority of written research, often conducted by Western enthusiasts and academics, the consensus is that Munge learned how to carve figurines from Zaramo carvers at a Lutheran mission in Dar es Salaam. He interacted with these artists while stationed as an active member of the British Empire's Career Corps during the First World War. It is almost certain that Munge interacted with Makonde, Makua, and Zaramo sculptors who were working together under the patronage of the Lutheran Church during the First World War. Indeed, historians and enthusiasts of Makonde Blackwood sculpture should resist the totalizing thrust of ethnography paradigms, specifically the idea of ethnic autochthony and the one tribe, one style paradigm highlighted by Sydney Casfer in her paper, African Art and Authenticity. Contemporary Makonde sculpture is not necessarily the sole preserve of ethnic Makonde, but an inclusive movement encompassing urban Makonde immigrants in Dar es Salaam, as well as members of other ethnic communities. Salum Ali Chuma, pictured here, is considered one of the most prominent and influential Blackwood carvers of the 20th century. Professor Elias Jengo writes that Chuma worked alongside prominent Makonde sculptors like Chanuo Maundu and Dastan Nyedi in the yard behind Pira's shop in the 1960s and 70s. Chuma, however, is not a Makonde, but a member of the Zaramo community. Across East Africa in the 20th century, large numbers of Blackwood sculptures were sold to tourists as authentic Makonde sculptures from Dar es Salaam, but were in fact created by non-Makonde artists in Nairobi, Mombasa, Arusha, and other urban centers across the region. The Makonde Blackwood sculptural movement could therefore be seen as a transnational East African movement. There was undoubtedly a select group of Makonde individuals, patronized by Mohammed Pira, who drove and led this East African movement conceptually and aesthetically. People like Clemens Ngala, Samaki Likankoa, Roberto Yakobo Sangwani are responsible for creating the Mawingu, Shetani, and Ujamaa styles of sculpting incorporated wildly by sculptors across the region. These genres were certainly rooted and inspired by the artists' experience as Makonde migrants from the Mweda Plateau now settled in urban Dar es Salaam. However, last year I interviewed Matthias Nampoka, prominent contemporary Blackwood sculptor who also spoke at our first workshop in Dar es Salaam. His father was Evariste Nampoka, who also worked in the collective of sculptors patronized by Pira in the 60s and 70s. When I asked Nampoka if he considered himself a Mwedan Makonde or a Tanzanian, he replied firmly that he was first a Tanzanian and that Makonde Blackwood sculpture was the utamaduni, which is Swahili for heritage or culture of all Tanzanian people and not just the Makonde. Makonde sculptors who worked in collectives in Dar es Salaam during the 20th century were highly intelligent, skilled, and proficient professionals. They were acutely aware of their status as itinerant migrants in post-colonial Tanzanian society, which often led to discrimination and marginalization in their everyday lives. Yet, they were highly adaptable urbanites and consolidated their resources amongst themselves to create a vibrant movement of modern sculpture. Last year, myself and Zachary Kingdon were granted access by Salim Lalani to document and catalogue his extensive collection of Blackwood sculptures in Dar es Salaam. Mr. Lalani has collected around 200 sculptures by prominent artists within the movement from around 1972 to 2002. By interacting closely with the works in this important collection, we were able to see how artists like Thomas Valentino, Christian Madango, Pocas, and others use Blackwood sculpture as a medium to tell stories about their Mwedan Makonde heritage, to grapple with the stigma and marginalization they experienced in Dar es Salaam, and communicate the complex dynamics of multicultural post-colonial African nation states, in which many unique ethnic communities were encouraged to create a supra-ethnic national identity in spite of their disparate and often clashing ethno-linguistic histories, customs, and cultures. We were also greatly moved by the way in which these artists were able to achieve this through incredibly acerbic and sometimes sardonic humor and satire in their work. Thomas Valentino is a prime example of this. From the mid-19th century, the Makonde of the Mwedan Plateau in northern Mozambique had the most exclusive and highly organized military society in East Africa. This thorough militarization enabled them to resist incursions by slave-raiding communities, such as the Swahili and the Ngoni, and led to their reputation for ferocity across the East African region. They were called Mavia or Mawia, which translates as the fierce ones in Kiswahili. And this reputation also led to the myth that the Makonde were cannibals, which further fueled their marginalization and stigma when they migrated to Dar es Salaam. In this work by Thomas Valentino, we see two Makonde adults consuming an infant. It's certainly a graphic work, but for those of us who possess somewhat dark humor, it is also obviously a work of parody, parodying this myth that the Makonde were cannibals, which of course was a fabrication. I need not point to the other child at the end of the sculpture to show the humorous effects of Valentino's work. Valentino has many similar graphic sculptures present in the Lalani collection. He has a series of sculptures depicting C-sections, which were performed by Makonde medicine men and surgeons in pre-colonial times on the Mwedan Plateau. In this work, we see a recently performed C-section with a newborn baby pressing a gourd to its lips. This is again another incredibly humorous parody. My friend and colleague, Tanzanian curator Eris Chikawe, informed me that the Makonde, particularly Makonde men in Dar es Salaam, were notoriously fond of drink and carried this reputation among other communities in the area. Valentino's sharp wit here parodies this reputation, perhaps jokingly implying that Makondes begin drinking from infancy. Valentino was also fond of sculpting scenes of dentistry, with a zealous Makonde dentist here extracting the troublesome tooth of a Maasai Moran. The Maasai, specifically young Maasai men belonging to the warrior age group regiments known as Morans, were the predominant subject of East African wood carvers throughout the region. They remain the quintessential sign for a quote-unquote authentic pre-colonial African way of life. The Maasai were valorized, in particular by British settlers, for their large, centralized, transnationally organized society of warrior-age-set regiments and their long-held resistance to colonial soft power, Western capitalism, clothing, religion, and Western cultural mores, which most other communities adopted in the 20th century. However, their resistance to urbanization in particular had the opposite reaction among their fellow indigenous communities. Maasai are often condescended, particularly by urban Bantu communities in the region, for their continued insistence on pursuing a nomadic pastoral way of life, even in the 21st century. Further, their resistance to formal education and 21st century capitalist commerce further fuel their stigmatization by other indigenous communities, who often parody them as backward. Therefore, their features are often exaggerated in Makonde sculpture, as well as in the work of their Akamba competitors, and they are occasionally portrayed in a oafish, sardonic manner by certain artists in both communities, as we can see here in this work by John Almasi, which is also present in the Lalani collection. Dr. Kingdon related to me that in a conversation with Chanoa Maundo, I hope I got that right, Zachary, that the artist mentioned to him that he thought Makonde carvers in Dar es Salaam were far superior to Akamba sculptors in Kenya. As individuals, like Chanoa himself, in Makonde collectors were far more creative and invented their own unique abstract styles and genres, as opposed to the more dogmatic representational work of Akamba sculptors, which almost always depicted either wildlife, Masai Morans, or colonial-era askaris. Such insights into how the Makonde carvers saw themselves as a community among many in the region, as a cohort of artisans in direct competition with other communities, and as a migrant society, are key to gaining a more complete understanding and fuller appreciation of Makonde sculpture, which undoubtedly has been condescended and misrepresented within the canon of Africanist art history. Thank you. Raise your hands or just speak out a question if anyone has any before we move on.
Yeah, hi. My name is Martin Kimani, and I've learned a lot from the presentations. I'd like to know about the relationship of the Tanzanian government to Makonde artists today, and Makonde art in general. The relationship in terms of funding, in terms of engagement. On May 29th, we hosted the Minister of Culture of Tanzania, Professor Kabudi, at the Africa Center here in New York, and the gift he carried with him for us was a Makonde piece, which I found very interesting. So I'd really like to hear about that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think during our visit, Muhunyo and I visited Dar es Salaam last July, but we had a very intensive trip, only 2 weeks, and we weren't able to explore the situation in Tanzania vis-a-vis the contemporary valuation of Makonde sculpture in Tanzania. But it's something that we need to explore further, perhaps through our colleagues that we've worked with over the current exhibition at Alliance Française. But it's an area that I agree we have to incorporate into further studies. I'm sorry that doesn't really answer your question, but
when Tura joins in the second half, I think she could respond to that, because she's
back to that.
Yeah.
But if I can just come back on the questions following Muhunyo's presentation. In the Mole collection, there are quite a few sculptures that are documented as depicting various themes to do both with Christianity from a critical point of view, and also I remember very clearly there's one in one of Mole's catalogs that shows a Swahili person in a state of with an expression of disdain, which is documented as being again following this relationship with other groups. The disdain of the Swahili community in many cases was also something that Makonde migrants had to deal with in Dar es Salaam. So there's all those kinds of issues that fed into the movement and found expression also in the art, as in this case. in this example, but there's a lot more work to be done on those issues. So thank you for raising that.
Now, Adson has raised his hand. Or their hand.
Yes, Munyo. Thank
Yes.
you for giving me the chance. I'm Adson. I'm coming from Tanzania, and I'm working as the curator at the National Museum. Before that, I used to be a cultural officer. So to say my experience as Tanzanians, I don't have a clear answer, but I can say because I used to be a cultural officer for 3 years. To what I know, the government of Tanzania has created a good environment for these artists to do their work, and they are playing a great role for them to market their art at the international level, and the policy is very clear. And to what I know, for the case of I know you have been in Tanzania, so you get the chance to go to Mwenge. I know you have been at Mwenge to see this people doing a lot of craft. Did you get a chance to go to Mwenge?
I didn't last time I was in Dar es Salaam. I think, Zachary, you've been to Mwenge.
I've been to Mwenge a lot in the past, but that dates back to the 90s and 2005. So not recently. But yeah, Mwenge still goes on, but I haven't been there recently.
Yeah, but what I know, the National Museum of Tanzania, they are developing a project. I don't know at which stage, because currently I'm doing my PhD at Stellenbosch University. So for the past 6 months, I have been out of the office. I cannot say what is going on, but what I know, the National Museum is working on their project. They want to develop a platform for these people who are doing a lot of craft, so that they can have a special building to display their art and then sell it to the market. This is what I can contribute so far.
Sorry, one question from my side. Are they working
Thanks,
with
Adson.
Mwenge? Did I understand right? Is it a project plan to work or cooperate with the Mwenge artists?
Yeah, it is one of the kind of response that's National Museum through the Village Museum. They want to make sure the artists, especially the craft artists, they are given the international platform. So this is a behind of the project.
Sounds like a really good idea. Yeah?
So it sounds to me as though the paradigm there is of craft rather than art, handicraft, which is a long-term kind of trope that things have been bunched together under the label of handicraft, even in the name of Handico. The idea of art and beyond handicraft has not really been promoted within many Tanzanian contexts, especially national ones. Is that a fair assessment, Addison?
Yeah, yes, of course. Most of these artists that have been claiming for many years, they want a platform. So this is kind of the project. It is in early stage. I can just say it's just at the very level stages. They are working. They are just developing. The proposal is already done, so they are looking for the support so that to implement the project. What I know, because they want to. We have small market. Have you been at the Village Museum?
Only a long time ago, not recently.
Yeah, if you go to the Village Museum, there are some of the artists. They are given the platform to sell their products. So they want to take even the people from Mwenge and to be given a big international platform. what I know. This is a idea beyond the project.
Mhm.
Yeah, but
you.
as Zachary says, I think it's very important to really separate art from handicraft. So giving a platform is a great idea, but when this is full of simple works, it doesn't really give a platform for the real artists. You know? So if one of you is involved in this and can somehow steer the development, it would be really great if it can be separated in two sectors. So showing and promoting real art with also named artists, telling their names and telling their history, their profile, as we had in the first workshop here. That was perfect, and that would be great to continue to really promote their names and their special styles. And in parallel, perhaps selling simple works like elephants and giraffes and openers for letters and stuff like that, which is also somehow worthy for the people who create it and who have to live on it, but which is not art in my eyes and will not really represent Tanzanian art in foreign countries.
Martin, I think you have what will be, I think, our last intervention before we go on a short break. So over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much. Well, I think that the Professor Kabudi, who came to the Africa Center, was visiting Museum Mile in New York, had come over to see the African galleries in the Met, and was in some talks with the Metropolitan Museum. It was clear to me he has a very sophisticated understanding of art, and so I don't think I don't think he was here to push what was that word, crafts, or and it feels to me like we may risk falling into the same trap we're discussing here, and I say that because our predecessor as the Africa Center was a museum for African art here in New York. And this institution played a really formative role in presenting African art in New York. And in 1991, had an exhibit called Africa Explores, 20th Century African Art. And in that, Makonde sculpture was mischaracterized as commercially driven and aesthetically inauthentic. And that framing contributed to the marginalization of this movement that we've just been talking about. So even the question of what is genuinely art and what isn't is certainly an important distinction, but who makes the distinction? What institutions make that distinction? And is this discussion we're having building the institutional infrastructure in Tanzania and East Africa to make judgments of that kind that are participatory, that reflect the voice of the artist, the voice of people who may not be thought of as artists, but are in fact artists, as Makonde sculpture has shown us. And I think that's really the potentiality of the East African Museum for Art. And Muhonyo, I found your presentation and its appreciation of the linkage between the movements for independence, the political movements, and the art to be critical. And I think the next stage, not to put words in your mouth and think, is to continue looking at art and the evolution of the African state. Because when the African state, in the person of Professor Kabudi, comes to New York to the Africa Center, where Makonde art was marginalized, there are immense possibilities that we need to secure now. Agency is not merely recognizing New York City recognizing Makonde masters. New York City is not judge, jury, and executioner of what is art. Agency is Tanzania itself finding the institutions, the infrastructures, and the expertise to tell its stories of art, right? So that's just my intervention, but I've really been positively stimulated by all the presentations. Thank you.
So, these are very, very robust discussions. This workshop is scheduled to end at 6:30. So uncharacteristically for our timekeeper, I'm just going to open it up for democracy. Shall we continue rather than going for a short break? I think so. I think that's the general gist. Maria, you have something to say?
Sorry, I was just going to add to what Martin was saying about indeed this fairly fragile and artificial line between arts and crafts. Again, with Makonde, we saw how the amazing baby was thrown with very unsavory bathwater. But at the same time, for example, there is a wonderful Kenyan artist, Dickens Otieno. He is doing art with the cut cans and creates gobelins of wonderful of wonderful qualities. They're represented in various museums by now. He went back. He went to a crafts competition by Lowe's very prestigious crafts competition, and he was shortlisted, and as a craftsman exhibited in the one of the leading Thyssen-Bornemisza museum in Madrid. So one of the most prestigious platforms in the world, alongside the Louvre, Hermitage, etc. So, which is indeed that that can be defined only by scholarships. By scholarship that was sorely lacking in this, and scholarship indeed looking at the connection between state artists, but also looking at artworks as artworks and what they are called crafts, arts, or decoration or something else is indeed in modern museology can be sometimes relevant and sometimes secondary. So that's what indeed we are hoping to explore in Iman more deeply and at a different level. And of course, we hope to engender that discussion in other platforms as well.
Eugenius, apologies if I pronounced that wrong, which I probably certainly did. I believe you have an intervention. Please do speak.
Am I on the microphone? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I am calling you from Poland, Warsaw. The reason of me daring to join this workshop is that joining it lately, because I have missed two previous sessions, is the fact that the Makonde art is born from the very strong Mozambican connection, as you all know, of course. But I think this is a bit overlooked. Maybe Paolo Israel, who is specialized in Makonde culture, musical culture, first of all, and being a wonderful ethnologist, and also very full of attention and sensibility about the political factors. He contributed on the last session to this question, but we should not forget that even if this workshop and the whole movement and the story of this art movement is centered on Tanzania, the contribution of artists born in Mozambique, migrating from Mozambique, especially during the liberation struggle, but even before it started in Mozambique, and attracted by Uhuru, attracted by the fact that on the other side of the Rovuma River, there are the fellow brothers in Makonde as well. The most important Makonde artists, the most prominent, many of them are from Tanzania, from Mozambique, and including the legendary Robert Jacobo, the founder of Ujamaa style, as it is attributed to him. but many other, Jose Nangangola, for instance, when I talked to him, he claimed and he spoke some few words in Portuguese still after his immersion. So I think this is to be attributed also when you think and discuss the institutional participation, when you discuss the state policy, state approach, to include this Mozambican side of the art phenomenon, because it is also with some idiosyncrasies determined by the first decade of Mozambican independence, which was very marked by the stressing national unity and denying the relevance of ethnic identity to such an absurd and ironic situation when there was a first Makonde art exhibition in Maputo. The Minister of Culture, the wife of the president, intervened, and she decided, no, you cannot call it Makonde art. This is a national art from Cabo Delgado, and so on. But so this gives you the some political flavor as well about this ethnic identity, which was a taboo, well-known secret that this is mostly the Makonde artist, but this Makonde environment and background was feeding the national struggle with the majority of the freedom fighters in Cabo Delgado. They were based migrating from Mozambique or based in Tanzania, and certainly this art of Blackwood carving was marked by the ideological need and goal to stress the oppression, to stress the fight against the colonialism, to stress the national unity. So themes and labels for the artworks were very often marked by this ideology as a kind of order from the party, from Frelimo. So this is one of the factors. As concerns the institutions, I think this is important to mention the National Museum in Nampula, the capital city of Nampula province. They had a very good, they still, I hope, have a very good collection of the pre-colonial art. Margot Diaz, who was mentioned in today's presentation, the ethnologist of German extraction, but married and head co-author of the 3 volumes of the Makondes of Mozambique, was basing in the museum in Nampula. The National Museum in Maputo is also very active. Mozambique has sent several times artworks to exhibitions, first of all to the famous Paris exhibition. So my suggestion is to not to lose this link, giving, of course, the priority as the country of the art production to Tanzania, but certainly Mozambique, it's a part of the heritage of 2 neighboring brother countries, Tanzania and Mozambique. I speak from personal experience because I did work at the university, Eduardo Mondlane University in Maputo for 6 years as linguist and an academic teacher. But my main specialty is Swahili studies, so I traveled very often to Makonde countries, and I am fully aware that this is the cradle of the Blackwood carving. But we have to mention also the new phenomena in Mozambique, especially, but not only in Mozambique. The famous Makonde artist, ceramist Renata Sadimba, who lives in Maputo. He is one of the most renowned African artists speaking mostly Makonde, very little Portuguese, and quite a good Swahili. She is presented in many international, not only Portuguese exhibitions, very recently in Basel, in Switzerland, for instance. So please do not forget about Mozambican connection. Thank you for this privilege of being being in this gremium of the great specialists, to whom I send all my respects and greetings as well, Zahari.
Thank you very much for that intervention. Absolutely. I think when we're faced with issues around ethnic characterization and ethnic stereotyping, we really need to go back to a historicist perspective to look at individual artists and individual histories in order to make sense properly of what we have in front of us, and not fall back on stereotypes of ethnicization and so on. So yeah, I fully agree with you. I think we need to have a fully historicist view and a personal biographical view as well, in order to fully appreciate the development of this movement, rather than falling back on convenient group terms and so on. So yeah, thank you for that.
I think again, yes, thank you. Did Eugenius, have I pronounced your name correctly?
Eugene.
All right, thank you for that. I think
yes.
that's fair. We're an Anglophone country in Kenya. Anyway, I think, again, from an African perspective, there's a fine line between stereotyping and acknowledging culture as a sort of intangible heritage. I think East Africa is precarious because our contemporary borders, I know, Martin, you've spoken about this before, our contemporary borders are very recent fabrications. If we look at Makonde in Mweda, there were also Makondes in Nwala in Tanzania for a long time. There is a diaspora population of Makonde people in Kwale County in Mombasa in Kenya that number about 40,000 Makonde individuals who migrated there in the 1930s to work on sisal plantations. So Makonde identity, if you could call it that, the Makonde community is really spread out throughout East Africa. And as I'd mentioned in my presentation, their work has influenced the entire region's artistic production, to the point, as I said, in Sidney Casfier wrote about this a lot, that all of the Makonde work in Nairobi is made by non-Makonde people. So as much as yes, one should resist stereotyping, again, understanding that our borders are porous, that no one community really does belong to one place, that communities throughout the region have interacted with each other and influence each other constantly. That's, I think, also something we need to keep in mind even as we look at Makonde sculpture. And again, I use my example of Saluma Ali Chuma, who is in fact a Zaramo, but has been mentioned in continuous publications as a preeminent Makonde sculptor, in spite of being a Zaramo from Tanzania. So there's a fine line I think we all have to work through, and which is why I agree with Zachary and his position of historicizing the individual artist. That can give us a lot more context, and even more context into understanding individual works by individual artists. So just following on from your worthy intervention. Zachary, do you have any more questions for the presenters you'd like?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would also point out that going right back into history, we know that Makonde identity was formed at the outset from the coming together of clans from what are now completely different, well, seen as different ethnicities like Makua, Yao, Ngoni, etc. So the clan names, if you trace them back, you will find that they come from different what I see now as different communities. And obviously there's a history to that. There's historical formations that have caused that. And what we can't see in our present are the historical forces that are forming the new, as it were. So it's important to keep a contemporary perspective as well on how things are changing, and as you say, always moving and changing.
I have a question actually for Maximilian, if you could answer. Again, with our research with Zachary, last year talking to people like Matthias Nampoka and others, and hearing lots of stories about your father's interventions with their fathers and the Makonde community in general. How much did you know about, I suppose, the lives and biographies of individual artists growing up? Did he relay stories in intricate detail? This is so and so, and
well, I was really very little when my father built up the museum, and all I remember is that from time to time we had carvers visiting Bammental. Actually, we had one person coming to Bammental, but I can't remember his name. I'm sorry, but of course I was deeply impressed by this person living with us and being there, and yeah. So, but he didn't talk to me like about he would talk about his travels and how it was traveling, and that he more stuff for children, like that he drank, I think it was pombe, was it this banana liquor, yes, and so on, and so that he would that he loved the food there. So he wouldn't tell me about the carvers, but more stories a child would like to hear. I'm sorry that I can't contribute more. I mean, we have loads and loads of notes of my father at home, and I have to do a big, I could bury myself into work for 10 years and to write a book about him and his collection. And probably I need to do this, but it needs some time, and you can send me, I think, 3 students who can do their PhD on my father. It's a lot of work to do. So let's see what will happen. And I'm in the process of bringing the sculptures we still have, which are quite a lot, to a place where people can have a look at them and where I can show them to a wider public. But it's all in the process, so I can't give any address yet. But I will inform you and Zachary, and you can, yes, tell it to everybody who's interested.
Yeah, I think it's important to also to recognize that within the whole sort of landscape of collecting and people acquiring Makonde sculptures for themselves, based on visits to Tanzania or whatever, a great deal of if you like, documentation has got lost along the way. So it's really important to, bring together, I think, information from collections like your father's, which have quite good documentation in terms of the artist and sometimes the theme of the work as well, which otherwise, is lost. So, yeah, I do hope that there can be a broader Makonde sculpture project that can help to, to shed more light on the development of the movement as a whole.
Mohonyo, I think it's a good moment to talk about our platform project. And since you're curating it, maybe you can say some words.
Again, this workshop is part of a series of interventions that Iman has done in partnership with Zachary Kingdon, through support from the British Council Catalyst Grant and their follow-up grant. Our report, which Zachary and I wrote after basically interacting with Salim Lalani's 200 sculpture collection in Dar es Salaam. is available online for all to read. The main onus of the report is, again, talking about Makonde art as an intangible heritage of Tanzania, the heritage value of the collection itself. That is readily available for everybody to see online, as you can see. This is a summation of the report. As well as that, you'll be able to actually see some pieces which we were able to catalog on the reports, of the collection. And I believe the first two workshops, for those who missed the first two, will also be published online. The first one was very informative. Hearing from, again, Makonde carvers themselves, Makonde artists themselves, talking about their challenges, talking about their current practice today, some of the sculptures that somebody like Bangwende Morris and Mr. Nampoka exhibited, they had made very, very recently. It was very informative and very insightful. And so I would encourage everybody, once we publish those, to watch the first workshop. The second workshop was equally as informative. Somebody had mentioned Paulo Israel. He gave a really, really, really good presentation about the evolution of Pico Masquerade in Mozambique, as well as Alex Bortolot from the Hood Museum. So this is actually the conclusion of a very, very long series of interventions with Zachary and myself. And again, we are more than grateful to the British Council for funding this. And yes, Maria, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Thank you, Muhonyo. Just to add that this platform is under construction. It will be ready in about a month. It will be organized by Makonde author, and his sculptures would be visually associated to this particular artist on the platform. We will also be fielding an open call for anyone who thinks that they have important Makonde sculptures. There will be an email address to send them to us. Muhonyo, Zachary, I'm sure will be happy to engage other experts. We'll be looking at that, and we hope to create this online far-reaching catalog and also gallery and archive that will present the artworks by artist, by country, and by whatever way curators will deem appropriate. And of course, an archive where we'll collect video and photo archival materials, and that we hope will become an important source both for research and for just visual appreciation of Makonde art.
So, Sebastian, you have a lot of questions in the chat. I'm going to hand over the mic to you. Perhaps you'd like to ask them. Is Sebastian with us?
Hi. Yes.
Yes,
I'm still in. Okay. Good. I wasn't sure if they will be read or answered in the chat. What was my first question? First of all, I'm very happy that I was mentioned in Uta Royster-Jan's presentation. That's great. After having the webpage for like 20 years, I somehow designed it myself in the beginning, and then later had some support on this webpage design. So it's still quite simple. Some texts are very old and can be optimized, of course. Yeah, and I'm always open for critic. Yeah. I had some questions to Maximiliane Mohl about the exhibition. So it would be great if we could hear or read when the exhibition is really coming up in Heidelberg. But I think you answered before that you would inform Zachary. So perhaps we can somehow stay in touch with a newsletter on Makonde topics. That would be great. And the other question was also to you. Your father mentioned a fourth book that he was planning to write, and he somehow, I think, also mentioned it's almost done, it's almost ready to be published, but it never was published. So is there anything that might be published, also perhaps online without printing and going into cost and selling it. That's one of my interests.
Well, he planned the book for many years, but then he was distracted by many other things as life goes, and he traveled widely. Even in his late years, he traveled to Asia and he traveled everywhere in the world, but didn't finish his fourth book. So it's up to me to finish that, and I need to do research and to do all this. And as it is, you need to find time to do this. So, but if I do this, when I do this, I will inform you.
Okay, cool.
Sebastian,
yes.
if you could share a link to your website in the chat, that would be very helpful.
Okay, yeah, of course. I will do so.
Presume you have it on hand.
Yes, of course. Yeah. There was one more question to Mr. Kamphausen. He's also joining, and he has a big collection, as far as I know. And I was just wondering if the collection is open for visits, or do you have to arrange individually in Hamburg?
Peter seems to have answered that in the chat.
I will check that. Okay, thank you.
Uta, you like to say something?
Yeah, thank you. Maximiliane Mohl, you showed 4 catalogs in your presentation, and one which was at the left side. Was it the first one? It did not have that title, Masterpieces of the Makonde, but just, I think, Makonde.
This is a good question. I found it in the shelf where all our catalogs are, and I thought, I present it, but it's not one of the. I think the numbers start 1, 2, 3, and this was just an extra publication on Makonde art.
Okay, and then if you are interested, I could show you Sebastian Hansen's website and what.
I know his website, and we had been.
No, I mean all of you, for all of you.
Oh,
just briefly.
As in share the screen, sure. Briefly,
yes.
Why not?
Okay, and then Collection Hansen, the network. There are different collections listed. The artists. I think the artists. This is really interesting. You have information to like how many? Like 10, 12 artists, and the signatures here. And what I find interesting, signing. Yeah, these are examples of the signatures, and then assigning sculptures. Here, Sebastian Hansen gives details of the styles of some of the artists. I think, especially as some part of the website is in English, this could be really a source for you as well. Okay, and under service you have literature, carving styles in English, and different information. I find the site really, really interesting. I'll stop here, okay?
Thank you, Uta.
And I think that Sebastian Hansen has shared the link. I have another question, if I'm allowed. Yeah.
Feel free.
As I said in my presentation, the artists are so invisible in the whole Makonde carving, Makonde sculpture, let's business or whatever, or movement. No, business. And I find it interesting that Zachary, I think, mentioned that they have memories and they have stories to tell about their encounters with the European agents and collectors, and that would be really so interesting to put these testimonies together and analyze them for how the relationship was. And I mean, there was money made from their sculptures, but they, on all pictures that I saw, they are really poor people. I think no one of them ever became wealthy. So there is some imbalance here, asymmetry, and I think that there is something to be corrected.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are so many aspects to that. Of course, there was power and economic imbalance, but at the same time, also there was a different attitude towards money, especially among people like Christian Madango, Samaki. We hear stories of heroic drinking sessions and so on. So yeah, you have to take all that into account. And for someone like Samaki, for someone like Chanur, it's very difficult to work out what happened to his money after his death. He was a very parsimonious person. He didn't like showing off money or wealth. He must have had more money than he showed. But he also preferred to live in a traditional way. So there's a lot of nuance and complexity to the question of wealth and how it was made and lost. There was a time when many Makonde sculptors had motorcycles. And then, of course, there was a time when they all lost their motorcycles. So, you know, the life of an artist is always precarious. And wealth was made and lost. So these are complex issues that I think also need further research.
We have a short amount of time left. Is there anybody else with one final intervention before we?
I know that Tura was supposed to be here, your Mukunyo co-curator of our Tanzanian exhibition. She even sent to our coordinator Uni some slides she wanted to present. She's now actually in Paris in a workshop. Tura, did you manage to join in? Tura actually was very excited to join in and to relate her experience as a young Tanzanian curator and artist, her first encounter with this artwork and close encounter. Would any of our colleagues from Alliance Française, Germaine, be there to share their experience of this exhibition, please? Finally, another person who I wanted to acknowledge is Husseini. Husseini was one of the big traders and collectors of Makonde sculpture, and he related his personal efforts, actually, at some point to create a museum of Makonde sculpture in Dar es Salaam that, for a number of logistical reasons, did not go far. He has also extensive collection and very personal memories of the first generation and later active both Makonde sculptors and collectors. Husseini, did you have a chance to join in? The Tanzanian networks today were very bad and many of them were down from what I heard. So I'm not sure. I don't see many of our Tanzanian colleagues who were planning to join in to the extent that they send their presentations. They're not joining in.
We do still have questions in the chat, Muhunyo, if you would like to continue with that.
Yes, I'm trying to think. We have Elspeth Courts has a rather long intervention.
I think there's much more to the Kamba story than you suggested, actually, because of its historiography. I mean, and the connection with colonialism over time. When we were working, that's one part of it. I think the apprentice system, which they used, that's been after World War II. That actually changed how they produced work, which is obvious, actually. But also before Kenyan contemporary art became, or even modern art, painting type art became Kenyanized, as it were, they were there. And it was my impression that many of my Kenyan friends actually collected some of these objects. across the board in their homes. They had more of those types of things and other things on their walls other than photographs and calendars. So I think that it had a more local importance in the 70s and possibly in the 60s. I only moved there, it was 1970. But during that time, I was working at Maridati Fabrics, which is in Pumwani. And at that point, the what's now in Kikomba was actually behind the post office. And I used to stop by and talk with those chaps. And from what I could understand, there were no Makondis there then. And I think Sydney Casper, whom I know used to know, I mean, she's now passed, I think she overstated that comment about how there are no Makondis, there are no Kambas doing Kamba work. Because in order to do Kamba work, you would have to go through the apprentice system. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, what's happened since, how the Kamba workers have moved into working with whatever you call it, the recycled stuff they find at the coast, the plastic. They're working with the Kisi, who you haven't actually mentioned, and I think that some of the Makonde are out there as well. There's much more of this interconnectivity, but it's not quite quite there. We also found different, as I said in my note, different founding stories, like the ones people, and we changed it at, this is with the man whose name I give you, we changed it for 1 year, so I'm surprised they're still saying that. But the people at Chengomwe, this is in 2006 and 7, they still were talking about Makonde connections, when most of us know it's actually Zeromo and some other people. So I think there's a lot more fine-tuning that could be done, and I really would suggest that you get in touch with Manuve and some of the other people at Tangaza who might know some of this information as well. I mean, we have, some of it's online, but we haven't actually published, so that there's lots of future work that's could be done. Now, I think that summarizes what I was trying to say.
Yes, I have some few issues I want you to help. As I told you earlier, I'm doing PhD in history at the Stellenbosch University in South Africa, and I'm working on the Makonde ethnographic objects that were taken during the German colonial periods that are currently housed in the Wilden Museum in Stuttgart. So I was viewing your profile, Zakar, and some of you, if you could help me with your publication, with your books, I will be very much interested to read and to take your ideas developing my project. That is one of the things that I'm very much interested with your publication and the books. If you can send to me, I'll be so happy to do it.
Definitely, we can do that. If you send an email to Yunya, she'll forward it if you don't have my email address.
Yes, I can write here my email.
Okay.
Yes, I'm using 2 email. I prefer this one. This one is my personal, I prefer it. But you can also contact me through my National Museum email.
Yeah, Adson, please stay in touch with Iman. We have our info at iman.org. It's on our site. But also, and we regularly look at that. And Union Mukhunye, I'm sure, will be happy to connect with you.
Yeah, these are my 2 emails, my Yahoo and my National Museum email. So if I can get your publication, your books, I will be very happy, because I'm working on this ethnographic object of Makonde. That's where taken during the German colonial period in Tanzania. Thank you.
Yep, I'll be happy to send you those.
Yeah.
Adson, jwamaitha at iman.org in the chat. If you copy that email and email Unia, we will definitely help you with some resources. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have come to the end of this very, very informative and amusing. Yes, Maria, would you like to end?
No, I won't want to end. I just want to add something before you end on this. I just want to end with what we started, that Great art needs equally great infrastructure of scholarship and appreciation. And each one of these authors deserves a master's, probably two of them deserve a PhD. And this path is just starting, and we hope it's starting right. And Iman is honored to be part of this very important road. And we're very grateful, first of all, to all our participants, to our wonderful coordinator, Junio Amaitha, who makes it all happen every time. And of course, to Muhunyo and Zachary for the scholarship that they have brought to this series. Muhunyo, take it from here, please.
Mine is just to conclude with a massive, massive thank you to all for your attentiveness, for your willingness to be here, and for your insightful interventions. Yep, thank you very, very much. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I hope you did too. Again, we mentioned some of the further research, so please stay tuned, iman.org. You can keep in touch with all our endeavors, which concludes this event. So thank you all very, very much for coming. Thank you.
And a big thank you from me as well, and to all our participants and speakers and interveners. It's been a great event, and as everyone has said, it's just the start. We will watch this space as we continue with our endeavor. Thank you very much.
Lastly, just I guess a thanks to the British Council for funding this endeavor on behalf of Iman, and thank you very much. Let's continue these connections and continue to talk to one another.